Emma and Lucas met during their first year of university, a time when everything seemed possible, and love was pure and intoxicating. Emma was studying fine arts, often found with paint-splattered jeans and charcoal-streaked fingers, her wild curls pulled into a messy bun. Lucas, on the other hand, was a meticulous architecture student, always with a sketch pad in hand, designing buildings that he dreamed would one day pierce the skyline. Their paths crossed during a campus art exhibit where Emma's bold, abstract paintings caught Lucas's attention. Standing in front of her work, he noticed her from the corner of his eye, sketching passers-by as they admired the art. A casual comment about her painting's depth led to a 3-hour conversation over cheap coffee in a nearby cafe. Their connection was instantaneous. They started spending more time together, sharing late-night study sessions, stolen kisses in empty lecture halls, and weekend trips to nearby towns. Emma's free spirit complemented Lucas's structured nature. She brought spontaneity into his life, while he gave her a sense of grounding she never knew she needed. They fell deeply in love, the kind that made everything else seem insignificant. After graduation, they moved into a small apartment in the city. It wasn't much, peeling wallpaper and a constant leaky faucet, but it was theirs. Lucas landed a junior architect position at a reputable firm, while Emma took on freelance work, painting murals and designing logos. Money was tight, but they made it work, often spending evenings cooking together, laughing over burnt pasta and cheap wine. Their life, though simple, felt perfect. 2 years into their new life, Lucas proposed during a spontaneous weekend trip to the mountains. Under a sky filled with stars, he knelt on one knee with a modest ring he had saved for months to buy. Emma said yes, tears streaming down her face, and they made love that night with a depth of passion and connection they had never felt before. Their wedding was small but beautiful, a gathering of close friends and family in a rustic garden venue. Emma wore a flowing lace dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, while Lucas couldn't take his eyes off her. They danced under fairy lights, promising each other a lifetime of love and loyalty. Life seemed to blossom after marriage. Lucas's career took off. He began leading projects and brought home a steady income. Emma, inspired by her husband's success, opened her own art studio, attracting a loyal clientele. They bought a house in the suburbs, a charming 2-story with a garden Emma filled with sunflowers and lavender. Their love matured, evolving from youthful passion to a deep-rooted partnership. But with success came distance. Lucas's projects became more demanding, leading to late nights at the office and business trips that lasted weeks. Emma spent more time alone, the house echoing with silence. She threw herself into her art, but loneliness gnawed at her. Their conversations dwindled from long, heartfelt talks to brief exchanges about grocery lists and schedules. Sex became infrequent, mechanical, losing the fiery passion they once shared. The cracks deepened one autumn evening. Emma was hosting an art show at her studio when she met Andrew, a suave, charming photographer known for his provocative work. Tall, with sharp features and an aura of danger, he exuded confidence that instantly captivated her. Their initial conversation was light, but there was an undeniable chemistry. Andrew complimented her work with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way Lucas hadn't in months. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Andrew's paths crossed more frequently. He began stopping by her studio, bringing her coffee, and they'd talk for hours about art, life, and their unfulfilled desires. Emma felt alive around him, desired, exciting, and spontaneous. She dismissed her growing feelings as harmless flirtation, but deep down she knew she was walking a dangerous line. One rainy evening, after an art exhibit where they had drunk too much wine, Andrew kissed her. It was soft at first, testing her boundaries, but when she didn't pull away, it deepened, full of pent-up passion and longing. Emma felt torn between guilt and desire, but ultimately gave in, her loneliness overpowering her loyalty. That night marked the beginning of an affair that would slowly dismantle her life. What started as secret meetings and stolen kisses turned into nights spent in Andrew's apartment, where passion ignited in ways Emma hadn't felt in years. With him, she felt liberated, unburdened by the mundane responsibilities that filled her marriage. But with each encounter, a growing sense of guilt festered inside her. Lucas, preoccupied with work, didn't notice the change at first. But over time, subtle signs emerged. Emma's distant glances, late nights at the studio, the way she'd flinch when he touched her. One evening, while Emma was supposedly working late, Lucas stumbled upon messages on her laptop. Flirty, intimate exchanges between her and Andrew. His world crumbled in an instant. Rage surged through him, but he remained composed, deciding he needed proof. Over the next week, he followed her one evening after she left for her studio, trailing her car through dark streets. His suspicions were confirmed when he saw her pull up outside Andrew's apartment. Watching her enter, laughing and carefree, pierced his heart in a way he never imagined possible. Lucas returned home that night filled with a toxic mix of rage and heartbreak. When Emma came back hours later, disheveled and smelling of perfume and cigarettes, he sat silently at the dining table waiting. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice low but trembling. Emma froze, realizing instantly that he knew. "At the studio," she whispered, her hands shaking. Lucas slammed his fist onto the table, sending a glass shattering to the floor. "Don't lie to me, Emma." Tears welled in her eyes, but she couldn't find the words. Lucas's rage boiled over. He grabbed a framed photo of their wedding from the side table and hurled it against the wall. Glass shards exploded across the floor, mirroring the brokenness between them. "You destroyed us," he growled, his eyes filled with tears. Emma tried to approach him, but he shoved her away, sending her sprawling onto the floor, cutting her arm on the broken glass. Blood pooled beneath her, mingling with the fragments of their shattered memories. The sight of Emma bleeding jolted Lucas out of his rage. He dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he tried to help her up. But she flinched at his touch, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed, clutching her wounded arm. Lucas, overwhelmed with guilt and heartbreak, stepped back, realizing the depth of what had transpired. Not just the betrayal, but the violence, the unraveling of everything they once held sacred. Emma left that night, her belongings hastily packed into a suitcase. Their house, once filled with love and dreams, now stood as a tomb of broken promises. Weeks passed, each filled with silence and pain. Emma moved into a small apartment, while Lucas spiraled into depression, drinking heavily and isolating himself. He thought about the life they had built, the house, the dreams, the love, and how easily it had all crumbled. Emma, too, was haunted by guilt. Her affair with Andrew fizzled quickly after the truth came out. It had been built on secrecy and fantasy, not substance. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by unfinished canvases and reminders of her mistakes, she often thought about Lucas, about the love they once shared. Months later, they met one last time at a lawyer's office to finalize the divorce. Both looked like shells of their former selves, drained and hollow. As they signed the papers, their eyes met, an unspoken acknowledgement of love lost, of dreams shattered. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Lucas nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Me too." As Emma walked out of the office, she felt a crushing weight settle over her, a mix of relief, grief, and emptiness. She knew she would carry the scars of this affair for the rest of her life. Lucas watched her leave, feeling both liberated and utterly alone. The woman he had loved more than anything had become a stranger, and yet a part of him still ached for the life they had lost. Years later, they'd sometimes think of each other, a familiar song on the radio, a forgotten photograph tucked away in a drawer. Reminders of a love that had once been everything, now reduced to fragments of a broken past. Time passed slowly after the divorce. For Lucas, each day felt like trudging through thick mud, every step weighed down by memories and regrets. The house they had bought together, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with loneliness. He stopped going into the living room, where the shattered picture frame still sat on the shelf, its cracked glass a bitter reminder of what had been lost. Instead, he spent his days holed up in his home office, pouring himself into work, often staying late at the firm just to avoid going home. The nights were the hardest. Lucas would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from their marriage like a broken film reel. The first time he saw Emma in that paint-stained apron, their wedding dance under the fairy lights, the nights they spent planning their future. But the images always darkened, twisting into the memory of her walking into Andrew's apartment, of the shattered glass, of her blood pooling on the floor. At first he tried to numb the pain with alcohol, drinking himself into oblivion until he could no longer feel the crushing weight of betrayal. But after one particularly rough night, waking up on the bathroom floor with a pounding headache and no recollection of how he got there, Lucas knew he was spiraling. It wasn't who he wanted to be. Emma had already broken him. He wasn't going to let her destroy what was left. He started therapy, something he never thought he would do. The sessions were grueling at first, talking about the affair, about his own rage, about the moment he had shoved Emma and seen her fall. The guilt was like a permanent bruise, deep and unhealing. But slowly, over months, he began to feel lighter, even if just for moments. His therapist encouraged him to rediscover himself outside of the marriage, to find hobbies, friendships, and passions that weren't tied to Emma. He took up running. It started as a simple way to clear his mind, but over time, it became therapeutic. Each mile pounded the anger and heartbreak into the pavement beneath his feet. He began reconnecting with old friends, some of whom he had drifted from during his marriage. They didn't pry, didn't force him to talk about Emma, but being around people again, laughing over beers without the heavy cloud of sadness, was a step toward healing. Emma, meanwhile, struggled in her own silence. After the affair ended and the divorce papers were signed, Andrew had moved on quickly, too quickly for her to process. What she thought had been passion and connection turned out to be nothing more than an escape for both of them. Alone in her small apartment, surrounded by her canvases, she felt an emptiness she couldn't fill. She stopped painting. Every brushstroke felt forced, every canvas a glaring reminder of the life she had destroyed. Her friends tried to support her, but most drifted away, unsure of what to say. Even her family was distant. Her mother, always traditional and conservative, had been devastated by the affair, barely able to look Emma in the eye during their strained conversations. Nights were the hardest for her, too. She would lie awake, clutching a pillow to her chest, replaying the night Lucas had found out. His face, the pain in his eyes, it haunted her. The sight of him shattering the photo frame, of her own blood on the floor, the way he had crumbled to his knees trying to help her, even after what she had done, all of it replayed endlessly. Emma tried reaching out to Lucas once, months after the divorce. She sent a text, short and simple. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're okay." But he never responded. She couldn't blame him. Eventually, Emma forced herself to start over. She took a job at a local art school, teaching classes to children and teenagers. It wasn't as glamorous as running her own studio, but it gave her structure, something she desperately needed. Slowly, she started painting again, not for shows or clients, but for herself. The canvases became her confessional, filled with raw, dark emotions. It was cathartic, even if no one else ever saw them. Years passed. Lucas eventually sold the house, unable to bear its empty rooms and the memories that lingered in every corner. He bought a loft in the city, modern and minimalistic, no traces of his past life. He found comfort in simplicity, in spaces that didn't echo with lost love. He started dating again, cautiously at first. It was awkward, filled with forced conversations and lingering doubts. But over time, he met someone, Maya, a graphic designer with a kind smile and an easy laugh. She was different from Emma in almost every way, grounded, calm, and patient. Their relationship was slow, built on trust and honesty, with both of them carrying scars from past heartbreaks. Lucas opened up to Maya about Emma eventually, not the sordid details, but enough for her to understand the weight he carried. Maya listened without judgment, offering comfort without trying to fix him. With Maya, Lucas found something he hadn't thought possible, a second chance at happiness. It wasn't the same all-consuming passion he had felt with Emma, but it was stable, nurturing, and real. He proposed 2 years into their relationship, this time not on a mountain under the stars, but in their living room, during a quiet evening with wine and takeout. Emma, meanwhile, had also moved forward, albeit more slowly. She remained single for years, convinced she didn't deserve love after what she had done. But eventually someone came into her life, a fellow artist named Liam, who taught ceramics at the same school. He was gentle and understanding, with his own baggage from a messy divorce. Their relationship started as a friendship, filled with long conversations about art, life, and regrets. Over time, it blossomed into something more. Though she never spoke of Lucas in detail, Liam knew there was a deep scar in her past, one that shaped the way she loved now, with caution, with fear of hurting again. Both Emma and Lucas moved forward, but the echoes of their past never fully faded. On some quiet nights, Lucas would find himself staring out the window, wondering where Emma was, if she was happy. And across town, Emma would sometimes pass by their old house, now lived in by strangers, and feel a pang of regret and nostalgia. They never saw each other again, never had that final conversation to tie up loose ends. But in their hearts, they both carried the lessons of that love, the beauty, the mistakes, the heartbreak, and the healing. Life moved on as it always does, but the fractures beneath the surface remained, a reminder that even the deepest love, if neglected, can crumble under the weight of secrets and pain, and that sometimes the hardest person to forgive isn't the one who hurt you, but yourself. Years continued to slip by, carrying with them the ghosts of what had been and the weight of what was lost. Lucas settled into his new life with Maya. Their marriage was built on communication and mutual respect, qualities Lucas now understood were the pillars of a strong relationship. Yet even with happiness surrounding him, there were quiet moments when Maya slept beside him or when he was driving alone, that thoughts of Emma crept in like uninvited guests. These memories weren't about longing or regret for what could have been. It was more complex, a reflection on how life could twist and bend, how love could evolve from pure passion into something fragile, and eventually into a distant, painful lesson. One winter afternoon, Lucas received an unexpected letter. It was handwritten in a familiar looping script that made his heart race. Emma. He hadn't heard from her since the single unanswered text years ago. He sat at his desk, the city skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, and opened the envelope. Lucas, I hope this letter finds you in peace and happiness. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and I can't blame you for that. But there have been so many things left unsaid, and I need to write them. Not for forgiveness, because I've learned that some things can't be forgiven, but maybe for closure, for both of us. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, not just for the affair, but for all the cracks that formed in our marriage long before that. I've spent years trying to understand myself, to understand how I could have destroyed something so beautiful. And I've realized that I was broken long before Andrew ever entered the picture. Lonely, lost, and too scared to reach out to you when I needed you most. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I thought you deserved to know. I still remember the night you found out, the look in your eyes. It's haunted me ever since. I remember the glass, the blood, the rage, and the heartbreak. I've carried that with me, Lucas. It changed me, shaped me into someone I didn't recognize for a long time. But through all the darkness, there were moments when I thought of the love we had, the real love, the kind of love that made me believe in forever. I heard from a mutual friend that you got remarried. I'm happy for you, truly. I hope she gives you all the things I couldn't. I hope you're able to love her without fear, without the shadows of our past lingering over you. As for me, I've been working at an art school, teaching kids how to paint. It's funny in a way. I teach them about colors and textures, but mostly I teach them about expression, how to pour themselves onto the canvas when words fail. It's helped me heal in ways I never thought possible. I'm not writing to reopen wounds. I just wanted to say thank you for loving me once, for believing in me even when I stopped believing in myself. And I wanted you to know that I'm okay now. Finally, take care of yourself, Lucas. With love, always, Emma. Lucas sat in silence after finishing the letter. A wave of emotions washed over him. Anger, sadness, nostalgia, and unexpectedly, peace. She had written everything he never knew he needed to hear. It wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about closure, about tying off the loose ends that had frayed inside him for so long. That night he sat on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. Maya joined him, curling up beside him under a blanket. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly. Lucas hesitated, then handed her the letter. She read it silently, her eyes moving across the words with care. When she finished, she placed the letter on the table and looked at him. "How do you feel?" He thought for a moment. "Lighter," he admitted. "Like I've been carrying this weight for so long, and it's finally gone." Maya smiled gently and placed her hand over his. "I'm glad. She was a part of your story, Lucas. It doesn't mean she still holds power over you." He squeezed her hand, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Maya, for everything." They sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Meanwhile, across the city, Emma stood in her small studio apartment, surrounded by canvases and paints. A new piece stood on the easel, abstract, filled with dark shades that gradually bled into lighter hues. It was messy, imperfect, but it was hers. She placed the final brushstroke and stepped back, feeling a rare sense of completion. She didn't know if Lucas would respond to the letter, but that didn't matter. Writing it had been enough. It was a final chapter, a release. Her phone buzzed. A message from Liam, the ceramic artist she had been seeing. It was simple. "Dinner tonight? I miss you." Emma smiled softly, typing back, "I'd love that." As she washed the paint from her hands, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Older, lines around her eyes, but there was something new there too. A sense of peace, of acceptance. Life had fractured her once, split her open in the most brutal way. But somehow, through all the pain, through the love lost and the guilt carried, she had found herself again. And so had Lucas. Their lives had diverged, their paths scarred with mistakes and heartbreak, but they had both found a way to keep walking, toward hope, toward love, toward forgiveness, even if it was only for themselves. In the end, that was enough.